So please help me welcome Dr. Congressman and Presidential Candidate Ron. And of course, a few weeks ago, there was a bill on the House and the Senate floor, the Stop Online Piracy Act, which once you discovered that, a few messages were sent out, and all of a sudden there was a response in Washington. And guess what? Members of Congress took their names off the bill, and the leadership was forced to remove that bill.
And they can get 10 years for that.
of the population of the world. And we have 25% of the world's prisoners. So what does that mean? Does that mean the American are bad people? Or does it mean that we have way too many nonsensical laws?
was able to be tried. I think that anybody should be able to be tried.
a so-called a bad person is something that has to be reversed. We cannot ignore it. I'm always delighted when the crowds that come out are very numerous and you know about it. So that means this information is not being kept secret. It is out in the open, and that once again emphasizes the fact why we have to keep the internet free and that we have access to it. The President hasn't been a friend of civil liberties, although he claimed he would be. The Congress has not been defending our civil liberties. They passed the law to allow these arrests. But also, this week the Supreme Court had a ruling, a 5-4 ruling, that said that anyone who has been approached by a police officer can be strip searched without probable cause. So there are a couple of things that symbolically at least that has to be changed. Is one, the symbolism that we see on television and all the pictures of what happens at the airport and the groping of the TSAs and the AHs and the x-rays. If we put up with that and not say no more, there's something wrong with us. Our attack on civil liberties has been going on for a long time. It got much worse in the last 10 years, especially since 9/11. It was shortly after 9/11. Understandably, we were all very, very concerned about what was happening. But I think the analysis was very good. It was considered almost treasonous to suggest that maybe 9/11 had something to do with the phenomenon described by the CIA and the Defense Department, the thing called blowback. Maybe that had something to do with it. Problems that we have with our foreign policy and see the connection, the attack and the correction has been the attack on the American people. So the first bill that passed after 9/11 was the Patriot Act. So that too should be high on our list for repealing legislation. That bill was being passed, I remember it clearly, because I was sitting on the House floor talking to another member. There weren't very many of us that voted against it. So he was obviously voting for it. I said, why are you voting for this? He says, I said, you probably haven't even read it because it's only been out on the floor about an hour or so. He said, oh no, I haven't read it. And I said, you know, we'll probably have a lot of that stuff in it. He said, yeah, I know that too. And I said, why are you going to vote for it? He said, because it's called the Patriot Act. He says, how can I vote against the Patriot Act under these conditions? What would I tell my people back home? I said, well, that's your job. Go home and explain it to them why you need to vote that way. And I'm sure you're aware of the fact that if you see the title of a bill going through the Congress, it probably has a title that is exactly opposite of what it's going to do. So, if the bill had said repeal the Fourth Amendment, maybe they wouldn't have gotten so many votes. So, next year or so, we have that chance. The bill will say repeal, or no, restore the Fourth Amendment Act and repeal the Patriot Act. Various reasons why there's been a systematic attack on our liberties. One is that, and one that none of us like to admit, it's not our fault. We've been careless, we've been apathetic and lackadaisical about it, and they do these things and we don't hear about it, and they've gone away with it. That is what I think is changing. I don't find people like you in an audience like this as being lackadaisical when it comes to protecting freedom. still a lot of discrimination in this country. There's a lot of talk about the race wars going on and the fighting and the squirming around. But sometimes I think they miss the point where real discrimination occurs. I believe it's the enforcement of the drug laws. I believe that.
And spend money that you have, waste your money if you want to, but the
go to the same church. We don't all want to read the same books. We shouldn't all want to have enforcement of our same habits. We shouldn't have the government enforcing us how to spend our own money. So the problem, though, is some people will say, yeah, I like this idea to a certain degree, but sometimes people just abuse these personal liberties and they practice bad habits. We have to take care of them and prevent them from hurting themselves. What they're saying is they think that if you're allowed to make your own choice and you make a choice that they don't like, then you've endorsed what they do. But that's not the case. If somebody takes the First Amendment and they practice a certain religion or no religion, that doesn't mean you endorse what they do. In the same way with economic liberty. People might spend their money one way or waste their money, but you don't endorse what they do. But what you do is you have to tolerate what they do. Divisiveness has been there generally for a long time. This group wanting power and passing out the loot against this group. Now we're broke. So now the fighting is getting very tense. That's why they don't even bring budgets up anymore, because there's nothing there to budget and we're not producing anything. The issue of liberty that should bring us together. And that means that people who want to use their liberty in one way versus another way, while we should come together and we all agree that liberty is the issue, the freedom of choice, deciding what we eat, drink, how we spend our money, always we should come together, and then we're all friends, not because we want to have the same kind of life, but we can come together because we understand and believe that people can come together and make the country a lot less divisive. Another thing that has to happen, this concept of individual liberty really has to be individual. And we use hyphenated Americans too often. If we understand what true liberty is, it's because you're an individual, not because you belong to any group. You can't penalize anybody in a group because they belong to a group. They can't have unfair passage of laws or enforcement of law because they belong to a certain group. But they should also not get privileges either because you belong to a certain group. You should have responsibility, the individual to have incentive and responsibility to take care of oneself. And I believe that is the best road to peace and prosperity, and not by the government being involved in the collection of all these taxes and pretending that they can fairly distribute this and take care of everybody, and it ends up in a dogfight. And that's what we're in today. That is what we have to say. Another problem that we've had is that we drift a long way from the concept of republic and the concept of individual rights, because we now essentially have almost pure democracy. Pure democracy means that you can get a collection of individuals, 51%, you can remove the rights from the others, so the minority doesn't get protected. But the other thing that annoys me about that is we are going about the world pretending that we can police the world and go into nation building and spread our democratic values and American exceptionalism. We go in there, we can't cause a war, we take it over and say, you're going to have elections just like we have elections. Then, sometimes, we get to that point, they have an election, they elect the wrong people. We don't like them, so we won't accept the election. I have an answer for that. Why don't we just mind our own business and keep it right? democracy essentially wastes, and it consumes to the point where it self-destructs. Now we've been wasting and we've been consuming, we're in big debt, we have a currency that has no value, there's a false illusion of trust in our money. So we're at this point that we waste and consume, but the third stage, they said, was self-destruct. And I'm afraid we're on the verge of that. That is why we must get ready rather quickly to know what we're going to put in place, because if we don't change the people's attitude, they're not going to replace it with liberty. They're going to say what we need are more tyrants in Washington and more rules and regulations. They're still arguing today that the reason that we had the Depression as well as this recent recession, we didn't have enough regulations on the economy, and we didn't have the Federal Reserve regulating things quite well enough. They don't today, we don't have the direct ownership, but we have a lot of bureaucratic political control locally and nationally, where it's really not your land anymore, and you can't do anything. You have to get permission. So true ownership doesn't exist. A lot of people worry about this and say, well, this is impossible because wouldn't this destroy the environment? Quite frankly, I don't think so at all. I don't believe that would happen. Because if you look at history and look at the movement in the last 200 or 300 years, the bigger the government, the more socialistic it is, the worse the environment was. The basic principle that you can't harm another person, you can't take another person's property, you can't injure another person's property. You have no right to pollute anybody's air. You have no right to dump your garbage in anybody's yard. You have no right to pollute any water. And this should have stopped during the Industrial Revolution before the corporations got together with big government and wrote the laws where they did pollute, and they continue to do it. The regulatory approach at the federal level to solve that problem is not the way to go. It should be done through property ownership and this complete rejection of anybody's right to pollute somebody else's property. But the Constitution doesn't prohibit local communities to devise some regulations and rules and set some standards. So that is not ruled out. But my healthy skeptical attitude about the federal government, I don't have high hopes that that's going to work. Matter of fact, there are some people who suggested, well, the federal government isn't doing quite a good enough job on this. What we need is the United Nations taking over. Is turned over to a small class of people, to a minority, to the wealthy. But what happens at the end stages is loss of confidence. And we're at that stage. The loss of confidence in the rule of law, the loss of confidence in our government, the loss of confidence in the money, and then when you break down the monetary system, it's a real threat. So this is why I worry at times about the Department of Homeland Security when they go out and buy 500 million bullets to put into their guns. Who are they going to be shooting at? Economics in the last 100 years have made great strides. The Depression, Mises predicted the Depression way back in the 20s, knowing what would happen. And certainly the Austrian economists were correct about what's happening now with this NASDAQ or the housing bubble. So we've made great strides. It's a lot better than even the free market economists of the 19th century. And now we're in the 21st century. So we have a lot to hold on to, a lot to build on. We have a lot of energy. You're part of it. Everybody who comes around to understanding this, just basically, guess what? A greater burden falls on you because you have more obligation. And believe me, the country is always moved by a small group of people. So if you're it's in this particular campaign or your campaign or getting yourselves involved in education, there's always a job. I was taught a long time ago that if you do your job right and you learn the issue, you don't have to go searching for a job. It will come to you. People will come and you will know what you have to do. And I'm sure that will happen to many of you. So with that in mind and with necessity now being clear, because it is the need that is so essential that has been discovered these last 4 years. I've been talking and visiting with people for 30 years on this, but there's something dramatically different in these last 4 years. It's because the economic crisis is real. Young people know what they're facing. They know that they have debt, no good jobs coming. You can't solve the problem with debt. The people in this country are sick and tired of the war. The time is right. This time is right for us to win this cause.